Hello and welcome. My name is Vaishali Kulkarni and I welcome you all to the Makar Sankranti Utsav organized by HSS Wolfsburg. What we actually do as a HSS? The main purpose of HSS is to grow together and help each other through the strength of each one's. We meet on every Friday on a regular basis and usually do a physical and interpersonal activities, as we refer it as a Baudhik and a Sharirik. Every Friday, we choose any intellectual topic for the discussion and ask everyone's viewpoint on it. Through these activities, at the end of the Shakha, we add something new to our knowledge and try to brainstorm on it. In a Sangha, we actually say Sangathan mein Shakti hai, which means helping each other and growing together. Last year, we have celebrated Raksha Bandhan festival and our Bhaginis from Sangha tied a Rakhi band to the government officials and COVID warriors from Wolfsburg. One of them is the mayor of Wolfsburg. We also explained them the importance of our festival, and with that, we also celebrated Makar Sankranti, Yoga Day, Diwali, and Gita Jayanti. Today, we start this program through our Sanghik Geet. I request Kaustub ji to perform it. Kaustub?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? All?
Yes, you are
Okay,
audible.
perfect. Okay. हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, भेदभाव को नहीं सहे, संघर्षों से दुखी जगत को मानवता की शिक्षा दे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, एक ब्रह्म कुछ और नहीं, हरिहर दुर्गा मात वही, देव देविया रूप उसी का, देश काल अनुसार सही, सब पंथों का मान करे, सब ग्रंथों से ज्ञान गहे, सद्गुरुओं की सीख समझ कर जीवन को जीना सीखे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, जो भाई भटके बिछड़े, हाथ पकड़ ले साथ चले, भोजन कपड़ा घर की सुविधा, शिक्षा सबको सुलभ रहे, ऊंच नीच लवलेश न हो, छुआछूत अवशेष न हो, एक रहूं सबकी नस नस में, अपनेपन की रीत गहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे, हिंदू हिंदू एक रहे। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Kaustub. With the motto of this unity, we can now start our program more enthusiastically. Geographically, we all know from this Sankranti or from this day onwards, day grows more and more, which means every day sunset time shifts forward with some seconds. Although it is a natural thing to happen, from this day onward, we get a new energy and we celebrate it. Most of us, we live outside the India, and now we all know the importance of sun and sunlight. Growing in India, we actually don't value the importance of sunlight. But now we know how much it is important for our health. For example, mental and physical health. Basically, Sankranti is recognized as a Tilgur, Patang, Haldi Kunku, etc. Sankranti here means transfer. This day is considered as the transition day of Sun into Capricorn. But from last year's Sankranti program, organized by HSS Wolfsburg, we got to know that it is a very popular festival throughout the India. Although the core thought of a Surya Puja and increasing the duration of daylight is same everywhere, we can see many forms of the same thought can be celebrated throughout India. In the south, we called it as a Pongal, in the north, Lori, in the east, Bihu, and in the west, Sankranti, or in Gujarat, we call it as a Uttarayan. Those are the different forms and names of it. Many observers go to the sacred rivers or lakes and bathe in a ceremony of thanks to the sun. Every 12th year of the Hindu observer Makar Sankranti with a Kumbh Mela, one of the world's largest mass celebration with an estimated 60 to 100 million people attending at the same time. With this celebration, we can see the unity in a diversity in India. Not only the cultural integration, but also Vishwa Dharma Prakashane Vishwa Shanti Pravartake is a celebration that inspires all of us who have such a high goals, and to achieve these goals, therefore we celebrate this festival in the Sangha. To achieve these big goals, it is very important to achieve a social harmony. So take it easy. We celebrate Sankranti by distributing Tilgul, which means simply we tell everyone to speak sweetly. In Marathi, we say Tilgul ghya god god bola. The essence of this is that we are expressing the social harmony without any discrimination. If the society is united, then naturally the nation will be united. And then we will move towards our goal of seeing India as a Vishwa Guru and ultimately a world peace. You may have an idea that the sesame seeds are used in a yagya as a ahuti, neither the wheat nor the rice. Why? The main reason for this is that a sesame is an oily grain and wheat or a rice is basically a watery grain. Oil helps fire as a fuel to keep the fire burning for the longer duration, and that's why sesame seeds are used there. Now, the point is that every person had some potential like a sesame seed, but the process of roasting sesame seed till the uniform temperature is important. Once it reaches to the uniform temperature level, then it proves to be bound in a jaggery sweets. That's what called tilgul. In a sangha, we say व्यक्ति को समाज से जोड़ने की साधना. With this reference, we build our intellectual and physical core strength, means roasting a sesame seed till the uniform temperature and bounding it with a jaggery in the case of samaj or society. Then if we want to connect the people in this way, we come here to the HSS Shakha. We called it as a Shakti Peeth. We develop our intellectual and physical development with the help of each other, with love, brotherhood, respect added by every individual. And that's how the society will be united and cohesive society will be created. Now let's look at a very simple example. On a daily basis, some of us do some exercises. Some do gym, yoga, or some of us do Surya Namaskar. But after starting the Surya Namaskar Yajna from Sankranti, we all are putting our personal exercises aside and we are just came united to celebrate this festival of Sankranti and giving Yagya Ahuti in the form of Surya Namaskar. Uh, all of us, we have started contributing to this yagya, and nobody said that I will not do this or I will just go or do gymming or something like this. Everybody from the child from 5 to 10 years till 70 years, everybody contributed from their own. And now I will announce the statistics of last 17 days, how many Surya Namaskar we have contributed to this Surya Namaskar Yajna. So from last total 17 days, the total number of count is 10,000. There are number of 51 participants, and from Balgana, there are 6 Balgana, including Om, who is only 3 years old, and Oi, who is the highest, who did highest number of Surya Namaskar, 123 Surya Namaskar in a one day, which is actually appreciable. And there are 13 person who did their century in a one day. So these are the statistics which we are keeping record of this from last 17 days. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that putting your personal ego aside and engaging yourself with a society and uniting for it is like following God's will. Isn't it a great thing? This message we get from every festival. When we are specifically talking about Makar Sankranti, it is said that it is not just celebrated in the last 100 years, but it is celebrated from the age of Mahabharata. So today we have invited Mr. Nilesh ji to present their thoughts on it. So now I request Gunesh ji for the introduction of Nilesh ji. Gunesh ji?
Yes, sure. Yeah. So we have a very great Vakta or a speaker today, and it's my really pleasure to introduce him. He's basically from Chiplund, Maharashtra, and currently located in Atlanta. He has done his master's in chemical engineering and executive MBA. And this is what we call this is his prapanchik odak. So if we go in his speciality, he has studied the ancient Indian history for at least last 30 years and on specific subjects of dating Mahabharata or Ramayana for last 25 years. He is also currently an adjunct faculty member for the Institute of Advanced Sciences in Dartmouth. He has published 3 books, which we can see here on the slide. Apart from that, he has held number of lectures and online as well as offline, and he has published many blogs. Apart from that, what I myself found very interesting is that his scientific approach and logical reasoning is applied to all his studies, and it is not only through scope of one branch of science but more than 22 branches of science such as geology, oceanography, and others. So I would not stretch it longer. I request Nilesh ji to have a to give us the talk. Thanks a lot.
Namaskar, everyone. Greetings to all of you. Belated greetings, I would say, for the Makar Sankranti. The important point is that we celebrate. So if it's a belated, that's fine. We do that with the birthdays, and we do that with everything else. Can everyone hear me well? Can everyone hear me well? Okay. So Guneshji's introduction, but before that, I forgot the name because the name that is shown there is not her name. So she gave a wonderful introduction, wonderful prastavana related to in the context of Makar Sankranti. In fact, her introduction, going into some of the meticulous details of even the tir, like a sisme and yajna and everything, and the context of why tir and good and so on. It's so perfect and precise that's not what I was going to talk about. But frankly, she did such a good job that if we all choose to, in principle, we can just get into questions and answers, and I don't have to necessarily give my vacuum. But to set a stage and in some ways to all of us to bring it together, in some ways to tell you something possibly new. I mean, hope it is new. If it's not new, that's a great story, because that means you guys are very much in tune with what one ought to know. And also, if possible, to provoke you to some extent, because that makes it for a very good question and answer session. So if there is nothing new, then there is no point. I mean, we get tired otherwise. I know this everything. Why this guy is telling me the same thing? Something as a tidbit, she mentioned about the Shakha and what we do. Just my connection, again, I won't spend time on that, but it goes to very, very long. I heard she mentioning a 3-year-old doing a Surya Namaskar is a part of this. And I don't remember exactly when I went to say RSS Shakha, but I don't remember, which tells you that I was very young. But I know that I was going, and I also remember maybe possibly less than 5-year-old, but somewhere in that group, there was a wrestling match or some competition. And I remember winning that wrestling match and getting a 2 rupees award. This is going back many years. If I have to give another relevant instance, I don't know how many of you know it, remember it, or have read about it. Many of you may not be even born then. In 1982, in Pune, there was a very big camp, RSS camp called Tarzai, just outside Pune. Now it is very much, I'm sure, part of Pune now. Near that, I forgot the area, but never mind. But it was at the top of a hill, and 55, I think, if I remember the number correct, 55 Swayamsevak had come from the Maharashtra Pranta, which is not the Maharashtra as we see it. It's a sort of a western area, and now there are more. And just for what you call like a tidbits, like a trivia, I will say that among those 55,000 Swayamsevak, I was the youngest one at that. Okay, because I was like a 13-year-old. Actually, the limit was one has to be older than 15 to participate, but there are ways to get around, and so I was one of the youngest. With that, I'm going to start sharing few slides, sort of that also brings us all of us together on the one page. And so I will go for, actually it's a small group which I love. Actually the group is growing, that number, but I love, so I may even see if I can condense my talk a little bit. And because it's a small group, if we can open up for a question answer sort of a conversation, because those are the rare opportunities. As far as my lectures go, as Guneshji mentioned, I lost count of these. So I use that number and I keep on using that number for a few years, and then somebody says, no, now change it to this number. So I would say right now my number is 500 plus YouTube talks, or not just YouTube, it could be in some different medias. 500 plus blog articles, 3 books, and then there are many others that are not being recorded. But even the recordeds are like 500 plus. So you can always watch it for different reasons. I mean, and every talk, what I do is, even if I talk on the same subject, I try my best to cover something different, cover something new. So, it just, our cumulative knowledge kind of goes up. But with that preamble, let me start sharing. So please, somebody can unmute and tell me if they can see my screen with my name and Institute of Advanced Sciences, etc. That was good.
Yes.
Okay, so Makar, can you hear me? I mean, can you see the screen rather?
Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
it's visible. Yeah.
Okay, so Makar Sankranti,
Yes.
and the person who gave a prastana, she said it is going on for a very long time. She did a very good job of mentioning what are the different names that are used to Makar Sankranti. To that list, like she said, Uttarayan in Gujarat, right, and some other names. To that, I will also add, and she might have said it, and my apologies if I missed those. But because when does it come right now? It comes 14th of January. I mean, that's when we celebrate, right, Makar Sankranti. Now that happens depending on the Purnamanta or Amanta calendar that people use. It can be a month of a Pausha, because lunar month and solar month, or lunar year and solar year, they are always like trying to keep up with each other. We do that with the Adhika Mas, right, or Purushottam Mas. So there is therefore some variation. So most of the time it will come as in the month of Pausha. Sometime it may even come Margashirsha, but let's exclude that. But Pausha is very, very common. Then Magha also sometime it will come. So this also goes by the name Pausha Sankranta or Magha Sankranta. Now there they are referring to the lunar month, the position of the full moon near Nakshatra Pushya or near Nakshatra Magha. The reason we use Makar Sankranti is, at least when this particular tradition began some 1800 years ago, what happened was, it is indeed the Uttarayana. We are celebrating Uttarayana, which is to say, in a modern calendar that we all are familiar with, it is 21st of December. Now, of course, that moves 21st, 22nd, one plus minus 1 day. So that is what we are celebrating. About 1800 years ago, that particular day, you can say the smallest day, whatever you want to call it, or if you are watching the sun, rising sun, the extreme position of the sun, the way where it rises, when it reaches the extreme south, as seen from anywhere in northern hemisphere, Atlanta, India, or Wolfsburg, that is the time of the Uttarayan, because now it's going to turn towards the north, or it has turned towards the north. So these are various names. Now, of course, we celebrate in an Indian civilizational context, but it is celebrated in all over the world also. Now, that's not a subject today, but just to give you an example, something that has become a mainstream narrative, unfortunately, from the Western perspective, is like a Jesus. Okay, so Jesus, Christmas is what, 25th of January, 25th of December. Now, I don't know how many of you know that. Many of you may be actually aware of it, but I'll tell you a quick story. Actually, what they did, I mean, whether Jesus existed or not is itself a controversial issue. That's not the subject today. Then when Jesus was born is not even a controversial issue, because I can tell you that nobody really has a clue as to when Jesus was born, assuming even he existed. But that is not also the subject. But the context of this Uttarayan also applies to at least how the Jesus birth is celebrated, which is the 25th of December. Why 25th of December? Now you would say, well, the Uttarayan, or the winter solstice day, is the 21st of December. Why 25th? For that, we have to go back some 2000 years. Nothing to do with the Makar Sankranti, but I'm just telling you the funny similarities of it. Right now, we use a Gregorian calendar that began in 1582. Before that, as far as the Western Europe is concerned, where you guys are staying, there were pockets where people were actually doing good research and they knew about a decent calendar. Germany is one of them, by the way. But for most part, and especially the mainstream institutions such as church and even the royalty, they were absolutely clueless about the time, and there was a chaos. That is the reason why actually the Gregorian calendar came into being in 1582. Now, where did it come from? It come from a Julian calendar. They made some corrections to Julian calendar and turned it into Gregorian calendar. Sometimes you'll hear in social media, like people, us, like, sometimes blaming Gregorian calendar is not perfect. Those of you who have heard the name of Professor C.K. Raju, he has said something most people did not understand what he said. In fact, partly he's to blame also, because he also gave an impression that, hey, our nakshatra system is such that is perfect and Gregorian calendar is not correct. What he said is not correct. Actually, once I met with him and I asked him, and he said, no, that's not what I was saying. And he explained that. I will not go into that detail. My point is, the Gregorian calendar as it stands today, as far as a purely tropical solar calendar versus purely sidereal solar calendar. Okay, sidereal meaning it follows the sun's position with respect to nakshatra or a zodiac in the back. That has to do with the Makar Sankranti. The tropical one simply looks at the extreme southern position of the sun, extreme northern position of the sun. Okay, there's like a 21st June, 21st December. And when it comes exactly in the east, okay, the equinox, the fall equinox or spring equinox, just think of that as a 21st March or 21st September. I'm keeping 21st everything just for simplicity. The days do move plus minus 1, 2, 3, and so on. So now what happened is, when the Christian council, okay, they sat, this is called Council of Nicaea, sat in like a 3rd or 4th century. And that is the time finally they formulated the whole philosophy behind Christianity and all that. Otherwise, it was a clueless affair until then. Now they have to, therefore, now the whole thing is about Jesus. So they have to decide now when Jesus was born, or at least a time of celebration. The reason they landed on 25th of December is this. That time, the calendar that was used somewhat, not many people were not familiar even, or not using it, a lot of chaos and confusion, but the calendar that was used was a Julian calendar, which started after Julius Caesar. Now, the Julian calendar was assumed to have started in 45 BCE. Now, the Julian calendar, the way they take the leap year, I'll not go into the technical details, is such that whereas the Gregorian calendar is kind of stable, will remain stable for 2,000-3,000 years, and might have to make a correction of one day, and again it will be stable for 3,000 years. The Julian calendar, the day shifted by one day. So suppose we take 21st of December, or the day of winter solstice or Uttarayan, it would shift by one day every 128 years, because the way they were taking the leap years. And so now what has happened is, by the time of the 3rd century Nicaea Council, they are saying, all right, so in 45 BCE, the winter solstice was on the 21st December, but now some 300 or 400 years have approximately gone by, and you can do the math of 113, 13 times 3 or 4. So now they said that from 21st December, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, the winter solstice has shifted by 3 or 4 days. And that's how they decided 25th December. That is just an interesting story. If you know it already, great. If you don't know, this is something to really internalize and understand. My point is, these celebrations that are related to the extreme positions of the sun are there around the world. Now, the most sophistication was achieved in India. Okay, no doubt, no ifs, no buts. And we are not saying this to make ourselves feel proud and so anything like that. This remains a fact. The kind of the precision that was brought to this timekeeping is just amazing. And I want to give you some flavor of it. But you will find these extreme points of the sun. Okay, so the Uttarayan, Dakshinayan, and then the Vasanta Sampat and Sharada Sampat, the equinoxes and solstices celebrated around the world, everywhere. Even in America, there are situations which can be dated to 13,000, 14,000 years. Okay, now therefore it's very important. Whereas the world is going forward, world is now recognizing that whatever the Western Europe taught the whole world in last 300 years is utter nonsense as far as the antiquity of world civilization, I'm not just saying Indian civilization, goes. So therefore world is now catching up. The problem is our education system in India is still extremely colonized. Our minds are colonized. Even when we say, we'll see a wonderful Hindu Geet, and I'm not talking of the person who sang so beautifully, he sang. My point is, all of us, including myself, if you have watched the movie Matrix, it's like that. We are in the Matrix to the extent we don't even realize some of the things we take and we think they are Indian or they are Sanatan or they are Hindu. Number of them are actually artificially borrowed from the Western Europes, and they have become so internalized in last 300 years when they were colonizing us that we many times people fight. The song talked about not fighting. We fight among each other by taking something from outside and we think that is ours. No, it is not ours. It is actually many times faulty knowledge. How do we go to this 1800 old tradition? I will come to that in a minute, okay, when I show you. But let's move on. Usually we celebrate on the 14th of January. You would have also heard that slowly is moving to 15th. And yeah, over time, it's actually will go to 16th of January and so on. In fact, there are very few festivals in the Indian context that we attach to a Gregorian calendar date. Makar Sankranti happens to be one. I cannot think of another one. I will not go into the reasons of it, but that's fine. What does it happen today on the 14th or 15th of January? This is the date today. Still, if you look into the astronomy and the sky, you will find mathematically or through astronomy understanding that this is the day when sun enters the the zodiac area of Capricorn or Makar. That's why we call it Makar Sankranti. But remember that this name is temporal. Okay, we may continue to celebrate Makar Sankranti, but if we keep on doing this for say next 12,000 years, okay, because the whole cycle of the Earth's precessions or axis is 26,000. So let's say we go half the cycle through, say next 12,000 years. Do you know what would be happening? And if we continue to celebrate this, nothing wrong with it. We will be eating that til gud, the sesame and a gud, in the month of June. Okay, now sesame and good right now we are eating, and she explained so beautifully that in the yajna also it goes long way, but our body is also yajna. Those people, many of the Marathi audience would know the shlok vadani kavala gheta namagya Shri Hari se sahaja havan hote namageta pukase jivan kare jivitva anna he purna brahma udara bharana no he janize yajna karma. Even this is a yajna when we take food, and that til gud we take, just like in the Agni, it also applies the same thing in our body. It gives us the energy for a long time and so on. But just imagine eating that hot food, hot in the sense of Ayurveda, in the month of June. So some fun things will happen, okay, if we continue to do that. And therefore, Indians have made periodic correction. In fact, Makar Sankranti was a correction made some 2,000 years ago. Otherwise, we were always celebrating winter solstice. We were always celebrating summer solstice. We are also always celebrating equinoxes, Samvatsar. The Vasanta Sampat is a Samvatsar, beginning of a Samvatsar, and so on. Okay, so yeah, Tirgur, absolutely. Kites, rangoli, and all that fun. In different parts of India, it will be celebrated in slightly different. If you go to Tamil Nadu, okay, same time, but celebrated slightly differently with a kheer cooked outside on, just like that, what is that? Bihar festival, I forgot the name now. Chat Puja or something like that, something similar. Now, quickly give you a context of civilization, how old we are celebrating. I don't mean just Makar Sankranti. All of these festivals, their names might change. Some of the context attached to it might change, but we are celebrating because, as I said, all the cultures, and we are not exception. In fact, we lead in terms of celebration. These ancient cultures celebrated. They celebrated more. Okay, so this is a quick summary of my research work, at least as far as the time aspect is concerned, the antiquity or the dating determination. Quickly, the middle axis is the axis of time. Today's 21st century. If you go back to 0, that is that Julian calendar beginning, or like 2000 years ago, 45 BC, somewhere there, or that 0, we can say, CE and BCE. Minus 5K is 5000 BCE, 10,000, minus 10K is 10,000 BCE, 15,000 BCE, 20,000 BCE. I collected all the evidence of Mahabharata text that takes me. When I say me, it will take you also. In fact, if you take all the evidence of Mahabharata text, I'm just specifically talking here astronomy, but not limiting to astronomy. But astronomy is the only science that is capable of giving you a very precise and specific date, which no other science will give you. All other sciences might give you approximate region if you are lucky and if you have the appropriate evidence. But all the astronomy evidence, 300 plus from the Mahabharata text, if you try to solve it as a jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle, takes you to 5561 BCE, approximately more than 7,500 years ago. Ditto for Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, it takes you to 12,209 BC, more than 600 references. And Rigveda, mostly this is based on the river analysis rather than astronomy. Astronomy is now taking us back. It has taken us to 28,000 BC, 38,000 BC, from Upanishad 34,500 BC, but I'm not going to even show it here on the slide yet. It's shown in other slides. So Rigveda, just one point is, definitely the oldest portion go to more than 24,000 BCE, 24,000 years, 22,000 BC. What does that tell us? We have a civilization. So if there is a one takeaway from today's discussion, next time somebody asks you, how old is your civilization? With a very much confidence, assuming you spend some time understanding the logic behind and science behind the research I have done, you should be able to say with the confidence that definitely more than 24,000, without blinking your eye or feeling a guilt on your face or worrying now what is going to be the reaction of the individual who you are responding to. I mean, if the person doesn't get it, it's not your problem. It is the problem of that person's intellect, that person's ignorance, and so on. Okay, so this is the background. The talk said Makar Sankranti going back to the time of Mahabharata. Actually, it goes even back because it is the celebration of a Uttarayan. In the context of Mahabharata, what is the importance of it? Number of you would know that the war began, and then a war lasted for 18 days. Bhishmacharya fell down in the battle. He was the commander general of Kaurava army for the first 10 days. He fell down in the battle with the Shikhandi and Arjuna fighting with him on the 10th day. And Mahabharata tells us that from that day until he was waiting until the day of Uttarayan, okay, or the day of winter solstice. But please don't say Makar Sankranti. I'm going to show you that, okay? Because remember, the names are going to change. Already we shouldn't be even saying a Makar Sankranti. Not that there is any problem with it. We should be saying possibly a Dhanu Sankranti. Like if you know the zodiacs, Mesh, Vrishabh, Mithun, Karka, Simha, Kanya, Tul, Vrushchik, Dhanu, Makar, Kumbha, Meen, right? And again, Mesh will begin. At the time of Mahabharata, when the winter solstice occurred, we would have actually called it, by using the same logic, we would have called it a Mesha Sankranti. What we call Makar Sankranti, in the Mahabharata times, it would have been called Mesha Sankranti. Why? Because when the 21st, the Uttarayan, I wouldn't use 21st December, when the day of Uttarayan came, the sun was into that Aries, okay, or Mesha Rashi. Just like on the 14th January, now it is just entering the Makara Rashi. So don't get stuck on a Makara Sankranti. The important thing is the day. And we are so glad that somebody made a correction 2000 years ago and started calling it Makar Sankranti. It is time for us to make a correction if we choose to make it. But definitely we should celebrate whether we make a correction or not. We should call it a Dhanu Sankranta. But let's move on. What is the time and astronomy basis? We have already talked about it. But just to give you a visual of it, okay. So imagine Earth at the center, because we are watching everything from the Earth. Okay, that's how astronomy is done. Both Western or Indian astronomy is done this way. The whole world astronomy is done this way. It needs to be done that way because nobody is living on the sun. Although we know that the sun is at the center and so on and so forth. Now what you happen is you see this sun and that's going to go around. Okay, so it will start in the Indian calendar. This is the day of a spring equinox, like 21st of March. From there, sun will begin, complete one cycle, and comes when exactly to that same point of equinox. We call it a one solar year. Now, when moon makes 12 lunations, meaning 12 cycles, 12 purnimas, 12 amavasyas, etc., we call that as a lunar year. And there is a gap of about 10 to 11 days between the lunar year and a solar year. And to adjust that, we take Adhika Masa. We'll not go into that technicality. The four cardinal points, one is the spring equinox, vernal equinox, that is 21st of March, think of it in our times. Summer solstice is 21st June. This is the autumnal equinox. Okay, your Oktoberfest or somewhere close to that. Okay, autumnal equinox, that is 21st September, mathematically. And this is our Uttarayan. Now I'm showing our current time, so you can relate to this, by the way. So now what happens is, actually that has also shifted. Okay, so right now, as I said, this is the point of winter solstice, and look at the nakshatra. This is the end of Mula nakshatra, and this is a Purva Ashada, Uttara Ashada. This is the area of a Dhanu Rashi. Therefore, I said we should actually call, not just we should call, actually the correct name for our 21st Uttarayan festival, 21st December, is Dhanu Sankranta, we should call. Now, if you go back in time to say about, actually, I will take you there. You will find, let's do that actually. So I'm going back by about 1,000 years. And you notice as I go back, look what happens. The middle thing will remain same more or less, but the nakshatra with respect to these cardinal points of winter solstice, summer solstice are changing. So right now it's say Purva Ashada. When I go back now 1,000 years, now it's Uttara Ashada. If I go further, now it's a Shravana, 2,000 years back. Okay. Now that is exactly approximately when Makar Sankranti tradition began. So about 2,000 years ago, when the day of winter solstice occurred, the sun was here. Sun was entering the Makara Rashi, the Shravana Nakshatra, Dhanishta. This is the area of a Makara Rashi. So sun was entering Makara Rashi. That's why we call it Makar Sankranti, as our introduction person beautifully summarized. Like, Sankranta means it's a transition, it's a transfer. Okay, it's a moving from one thing to another. That was that. But let's go further. So if we go back, and I will go fast to the area of Mahabharata, say somewhere here, 5561 BCE. I said in Mahabharata, we would have called it, if we choose to call it, we would have called it Mesha Sankranti. Why? Because it's the end of Revati, beginning of Ashwini, Bharani. This is the area of a Mesha Rashi. Okay. And right now, just give another perspective. Right now, if you go to say Kala Nirnay calendar, 21st of December, you will find usually it is a month of Margashirsha. Okay. Now, in our times. But at the time of Mahabharata, it was the month of Falgun or Chaitra. Okay. And at that time, if you look at it, the month of Margashirsha, okay, it occurred here, Sharad, because see, the full moon is exactly opposite of where the sun is. So, and that's why Bhishma somewhere fell down here in Sharad Rutu, and then he was there on the bed of arrows for more than 92 days to waiting for the day of winter solstice. That itself, immediately, just this calculation also tells us that Mahabharata happened about 8,000 years ago. Again, that is not the subject today. I wanted to take another festival just to show that it is not just that is happening to Makar Sankranti, because people make a big fuss and chaos. You would have seen it on Twitter and social media. Oh, but and even then, common man we can understand. but our so-called experts also add to it their confusion, but they add their confusion as if it is a realized knowledge and create additional confusion for all the people. Why 14 January is the correct, and why 21st December is not correct, and so on and so forth. Okay, and why we should stick to our tradition and not give it up. Guys, Sanatano, Nirukta, the Yaskacharya who wrote Nirukta, these are the 6 Vedangas. To understand Vedanga, understand Vedas, we need these 6 tools, and there are actually more. Sometimes the list goes to 14 and 12 and so on. But the main 6 is what? Shiksha, Kalpa, Vakran, right? To just understand what the Veda mantras are saying and so on. Chanda, Nirukta, Jyotisha meaning astronomy. These things are needed. So that Niruktakar, Yaskacharya, he defines Sanatana as Sanatano Nitya Nutana, the one that is capable of refreshing itself, one that insists on refreshing itself. So somebody 2000 years in a great wisdom change it to Makar Sankranti. I'm not like say creating some forum and saying let's change it to Dhanu Sankranti. No, honestly, it doesn't matter. As far as I'm concerned, it's important that we understand this, we understand and we celebrate. And the beauty is, the very fact somebody did not change in our times Makar Sankranti to something else actually allows us to know when this particular tradition began, when that transition took place, like 2000 years. Okay, somebody updated. I want to take another festival and talk about how old it is. Just as a conclusion, Makar Sankranta or the Sankranta or the Uttarayan or the winter solstice is also a very ancient festival. Definitely goes to Mahabharata times, but even goes beyond. But we don't find any literary evidence that we can connect and say, oh yeah, they were also celebrating. Well, they were celebrating Uttarayan, but not the word Sankranti or name of other Rashis like a Makar. We don't find that much. But I thought I will share something because we do find this for this other festival, which again is at our heart, which is the beginning actually of the Indian year. Okay. Now we celebrate we call it Chaitradi. Chaitra is the first month. But you will find if you go back, there were times when different months were the first months of the year. Okay. Again, that's not a subject today. I want to take this festival of Gudi Padwa, the way it is called in Maharashtra, Ugadi in say Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, and then all over India it goes with different name, but it's the beginning of a year, the Hindu year. Sometime we will say Chaitra Shukla Pratipada, Samvatsar, and I'm sure there may be many other names. I want to tell you about this, and I'll show you what evidence we have. That I'm not saying it is 14,000-year-old tradition. I'm saying it is at least 14,000 years old tradition, or it is definitely more than 14,000 years old, because we have a solid evidence going back to those 14,000 years. Before that, we don't have evidence. Doesn't mean we may not have celebrated it, but we cannot talk about it one way or the other. So Gudi Padwa, most of you would know Ugadi, the beginning of a year, Chaitra Shukla Pratipada. Okay, so I mean, this is from a last year, one talk I gave in Toronto. I'm just pulling the date from that. Now, this date changes every year with the Gregorian calendar because we celebrate it with what? The Chaitra Shukla Pratipada. In the Amanta system, the first day of a Chaitra Mas. That's what we are doing it. It is celebrated in a different ways, in a different fashion. Maharashtra, it is called Gudi Padwa. Okay. So the Gudi is, those of you who know, great. If not, the Gudi is what you are seeing here in the extreme right-hand corner. A bamboo stick will be, and pay attention to this. A bamboo stick or some kind of a wood tree will be, stick will be used. And on top of it, you put the kalash. Now, this is a copper kalash. People will put silver kalash, golden kalash, whatever is people's ability, even a bronze and all that. Then they put one vastra, garlands, they will put some kumkum, haldi kumkum. And this whole gudi is made to stand. And below there will be rangoli, kolam, and all of that things. Again, just like the tilgul, there would be some different types of food preparations, which is always true all over India, around the world also. Like in North America, we have this Thanksgiving. Okay, so certain type of food festival, etc., done, various things as you see in the pictures. Dramas are performed, rallies are being drawn, ladies on the bikes is the new theme in India these days. At least in Maharashtra, on the Gudi Padwa and so on. Okay, so that's how it's celebrated. Pay attention to the stick and the bamboo stick and the garland and all of this. Okay, that is how we celebrate today. In Karnataka, you will find many border places celebrate the exactly same way, but some other modifications you will see, you know, the different types of decorations and puja that they will do, different types of food preparation, you know, it changes with the places. Now, how old is this tradition of Gudi Padwa and Ugadi? Well, I already gave you the answer, definitely more than 14,000 plus years. But let me take you to the time of Mahabharata. This is from Mahabharata book, guys, by the way, okay? Not the picture. Picture is from our times, but what you see on the left side. Okay, now most of you will able to understand actually if you read it. If anyone has a fear of a Sanskrit, please get rid of that fear. Actually, if you know any one of the Indian language, including southern languages, sometimes people make a big fuss of it, but people from southern India know that Kannada or Telugu, even Tamil and Malayali. There's so much. I mean, I was listening to one Malayali lecture. I was listening because that guy was talking about my research in Malayali. And of course, because I know my research, that's one advantage. But I could understand like a 40-50%, even the words he was using. In there are some Telugu programs on TV where people have discussed my work and they will send me the link. And so I go and try to say it. And in some cases, because they're using Sanskrit, but also English in between and Telugu, I could understand 70-80% of it. So my point is, Sanskrit is not difficult to understand. This is from Mahabharata, Adi Parva. And what it is showing is what I just showed you as how Gudi Padwa we celebrate today, but that's the same description more than 7,500 years ago. Okay, I'll just read a few verses, for example. Yashtim cha Vainavi tasme dadau vrutra nishudanaha. Yashti is that stick. Cha Vainavi, of a Vena, you know, you might know how the word Vena, Veta refers to bamboo. Now also we use a bamboo stick. They were also using 7,500 plus years bamboo stick. And what is the celebration? Vrutra Nishudana. Okay, it's a celebration of a chakra. You see, chakrasya pujartha. Okay, bhumo bhumi patistada. And what is the occasion? Pravesham. Pravesham is that like that Sankranta, by the way, guys, not to confuse with Makar Sankranta. Pravesham karayamasa gate samvatsare tada. It is a celebration of the year that has gone by, like 31st of December, New Year party, and beginning of a new year. That is what is been done. That is how exactly we celebrate Gudi Padwa or Ugadi today. Okay, so that this is a evidence that it was also being celebrated. How old is this tradition? It gives a whole background. It says Utsavam karayishanti yada sada shakrasya nara. It is done in the context of a Indra Puja. Remember the word Indra Puja. Even today we understand that as Indra Puja. If you go to Tamil Nadu, they call it Indra Visa Festival. Okay, it is done in the context of a Indra Puja. And now in Maharashtra, it has acquired the name sometime Brahmotsav. Even people use just Gudi Padwa, but you will see some shlok which says Brahmotsav. Indra, Brahma, Skanda, these are Agni, these are all deities connected with the sun. Okay, for different aspects of it, but they're connected with the sun. So not a surprise. Let me take you further back. Okay, so now let's go. I think we will jump to 14,000. Could it be older? And it's something I want to show you beautifully. How do we even preserve it? And how it is preserved in a slightly different fashion. And that's a great thing that it is preserved in different fashion, because that is an additional evidence for this antiquity. Could it be older? I'm going to take you to time of Ramayana. Remember, I said 12,209 BCE. So more than 14,000 years ago. You just from the picture, many of you would able to relate to it. This is the fight between Sugriv and Wali. Okay, Ram finally hit the arrow to Wali. Wali falls on the ground. And you know the other story. Ramayana is not a discussion subject today. But when Wali, after Rama's arrow hits him and he falls on the ground, Bhagwan Valmiki is describing it so beautifully. And in describing that, what he's saying is this. Just I'll read a few words there. Okay, Indra Dwajavat Kshitim Gataha. Wali fell to the ground the way the Indra Dwaj, remember the Gudi, Okay, the Shakra Puja, this tradition of the Mahabharata time, 7,500 years ago. This tradition also existed, and it's not like it started in the Ramayana times, 14,000 years ago. It would have existed before. I mean, it's a well-established tradition even in Ramayana times. Why? How do I know it's a well-established tradition? Because in describing something, we give an example of something that is well known to the people. Okay, that is called Drishtanta. Okay, just giving an example, we say, oh, it's similar to what is, say, if to us, to your German friend, you're trying to explain to this tilgul. How are you going to explain it? I mean, unless you physically give them a thing. So you'll try to explain it, and more than likely, I don't know what the Germans would say, I don't know German. But in America, when I will explain, they say, okay, so that's like a fudge. The Americans try to put it everything into some single categories, like the gourds. You say, I mean, we have a different names for the gourds, right? The pumpkin and like a bhopla and all that, dudi and all. Here it is a long gourd, short gourd, round gourd, gourd. Similarly, they will might call it fudge. My point is, you use something that is known to everyone to explain something. So when Valmiki is explaining, he's using something that everybody will able to understand. Okay, and Valmiki is a contemporary of Ramayana times. Indra Dvajavat Kshitim Gataha. But something more important, like that's how he fell to the ground, he's saying. Then he's giving some additional information. He says he fell to the ground like, as if, okay, similar to. And what does he say? Indra Dvaja Ivod Dhutaha Paurnamasya Mahitale. Please pay attention. Ashva Yuk Samaye Masi Gata Shriko Vichetana. He's saying, he's talking of the contemporary times, that is 14,000 years ago. In fact, this is one of the reference, although not required, but it also corroborates in a scientific language, or supports, or gives pushti, gives push, gives support, okay, tends to support the very timing of Ramayana, going back to 14,000 years. Again, I'll not spend time on that. I might have a chart, and if it is there, I'll show you. What Valmiki is saying is, Wali fell to the ground similar to the way the Indradvaj is let fall, or let it fall on the full moon of Ashwin. Now remember, again, it's a celebration of a Samvatsara, don't forget that, okay, like a spring equinox, for example. Now, in our times, the spring equinox, which is a month of March, what is the Indian month? Indian month is not Ashwin. Indian month is a Chaitra. Okay, that's exactly what we celebrate. Chaitra, now it's slowly shifting towards Falgun, by the way. Okay, so that's what we celebrate. Now, if you want to understand when the new year, meaning the spring equinox, began with the month of Ashwin, that is the time of Ramayana. Again, if you use the astronomy knowledge of the precession of the Earth's axis, and just to keep it non-technical, I'm not going to discuss that. You have to go through half the time, because Chaitra and Ashwin are exactly opposite of each other in the 12-month cycle, which means you have to go half the time of 26,000 year cycle, which is about 13,000 years back, which is what? The timing of the 12,000 BCE approximately. Okay, so now remember that in the Ramayana times it was celebrated on the Ashwina month. Just keep that in mind. Okay, now what happened? Of course, in the Maharashtra or Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh and most of our India, now as the time shifted, as the spring equinox shifted with respect to the Indian month over time, and when now it is in Chaitra, so we celebrate in Chaitra. In fact, very soon we have to make a correction for Falguna, okay, because now actually the spring equinox comes in a Falguna. Okay, Chaitra is like the second half of Vasanta Rutu. But my point is, some tradition, just like we are still celebrating Makar Sankranti, although we should possibly celebrate Dhanu Sankranti with the Uttarayan. In Nepal, if you go to Nepal, they still celebrate this Indra Dwaja festival. Okay, they call it Indra Jatra. For common man, simple Jatra, like a fair, something like this. It is celebrated in the entire Kathmandu Valley. I have personally witnessed it in different places. Okay, and remember, Ramayana is saying it was celebrated during the month of Ashwin. Guess what? In Nepal, to this day, they also celebrate during the month of Ashwin. In fact, because they use a Purnamanta calendar, it looks like they are celebrating in the Bhadrapad, because 15-day shift happens. Okay, Ashwin, and next month is Bhadrapad, and then the next month is Ashwin. So it gets celebrated. They will call it like as if they're doing in Bhadrapad, but it is the same time Bhadrapad Ashwin, and the difference is of course, due to time, but also because of Purnamanta versus the Amanta calendar. Quick summary, and then we will get into questions, answers, and some open discussion. We will have just a very nice conversation, a small group. So Utsav is the important part. Utsavs are there to serve multiple purposes. Now, I didn't talk about all of these. Individual and community well-being, okay, the food that you do, the Surya Namaskar that you do, the people coming together and sort of forgetting their anxieties. It's very, very important. Okay, I mean, we are seeing this through the COVID times and all that. The programs like this, it takes us away from our everyday worries, and it gives us that energy that with which we can go back to our everyday affairs. Expressing gratitudes, okay, developing that friendship with each other, ensuring nutrition like that tirgur, for example, or whatever is the right thing. Health, prosperity, niti, and dharma. There is a discussion of that. This is also an occasion for education and enlightenment, events for social communication, signals for the end and beginning of specific activities like harvest activities in the past, adhyatmic rejuvenation, remembering traditions, and remembering our itihasa. That we did it in this short time. Okay, to achieve this objective, Utsav connects us with the memories of the past events, which in turn serve as a guiding narrative. We understand our place in history, we understand our place with respect to other civilizations and so on. It is also important, very important rather, to realize that a celebration is in the memory of a past historical event, or past, or just not a past, a astronomical event. Why astronomical event? Because sun decides our life course. I mean, again, our introductor Prastavana person described it beautifully. Like, as now you live in Germany and now you value the sun more. Same thing here, frankly, in Atlanta, and I have lived in Canada also. In fact, I used to choose my place in Canada, even house or even apartment. It is facing south, and they have big windows, which is a great thing. And I remember, like, when in the winter, it will so happen I was at like 55 latitude, Edmonton. If you in India, if you are studying in your whichever subject, science or geography, that sun rises in the east and sets in the west, well, you know that that's not applicable, because I could just face the south direction. That's where my apartment windows were when I was a student. And you know what? Without even moving my neck, I could see the sunrise and I could see the sunset in south direction. So things change with the place. My point is, it gives you the historical context, it gives you a geographical context, and the actual dates, lunar month, tithi, nakshatra, may or may not match. And we understand now why. Because astronomy, so many changes, so many phenomena are happening. Those phenomena are very slow. Like one cycle I told you is of 26,000 years. That is the total cycle. There is another cycle, like a nod of the one, obliquity of the earth. That is a 41,000 year cycle. And it's like, just goes through the 2 or 3 degrees, which is a lot by the way in astronomy. But only that's 41,000 years. And that's not in synchronicity with this 26,000 year cycle. Then there are other cycles that I'll not go into. Okay. So all of this combined creates these different cycles. So don't get stuck. I'm not saying you are, but if you do get, or if you get across people and who in a social setting, they're just getting stuck into this, bring this to their attention. The actual lunar month, tithi, nakshatra may or may not match, precisely because we are celebrating an event of deep antiquity, or we are celebrating an event that has an astronomical context. Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutra, he says, once you are expert in Dhyan, Dharana, and Samadhi, then you have to use that knowledge for the benefit of humanity. And for example, he says, Bhuvanat Jnanam Surya Sanyamat. If you focus on Surya, focus doesn't mean just staring at the sun. Please don't do that. Okay. But understanding everything about the sun's motion, then you understand about our earth, the seasons, and what happens and why that happens, and so on. With that, I'm going to stop sharing. I think I kept up my time, 46 minutes and some odd second. So back to you guys, back to, I'll give the control back to whoever. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Nilesh ji. Actually, you have shared a lot of knowledge today, which we actually don't know. And like there is a cultural references to it. And before this, I'm very happy that we have so many questions from so many intellectual people. So I will start taking questions one by one. So there is a question from Sharanji. And he said, like, thanks to the wonderful explanation of Uttarayan, solistic. Could you please explain the astronomical significance, which is a sun movement of a Ratha Saptami? So, what is the astronomical significance of Ratha Saptami?
The significant, great question. The significance of Ratha Saptami is not so much astronomical as much as it is a celebration. I mean, it is a cultural aspect. And that cultural aspect, I mean, if you, depending on who you ask, the person may give a different interpretation of what that Ratha Saptami is. I'll give you one, and I will also tell you that that is a wrong interpretation, but that is a very popular interpretation. That Ratha Saptami, many times it's connected, and actually there is enough proof that it is a wrong interpretation, is saying, okay, Ratha Saptami is connected with, that is the next day, Ratha Saptami in the sense of Magha Shukla Saptami, and then the sun turned the other way, Uttarayan, the next day, Magha Shukla Ashtami, and that is the day Bhishma passed away. Okay, that is a one interpretation. There can be many. The reason is you don't hear first any reference of Ratha Saptami in Mahabharata, but that itself is not evidence, because there can be many things that happen in Mahabharata times, but they may not be in Mahabharata. So absence of something is not evidence. But we have a sufficient evidence to tell that although many in our civilization think like Magha Shukla Ashtami was the day of Bhishma Nirvan, it was not. We have so much evidence to tell us that it absolutely positively cannot be. Now, if anyone else on the call knows any other interpretation of Ratha Saptami, it will be great to hear that. But this is the one only I know, and I also know that it is wrong. I mean, wrong in the sense, there is nothing wrong in believing that for celebration purposes, wrong in a very technical, scientific, empirical, factual fashion.
Yeah, I request if anyone know anything with this reference, please add. Till then, we can take a second question. There is a question from Saiji, and she asked why it is called Sankranti, and in Marathi specifically we say Sankrant, or we use Sankrant word as a trouble. Then why it is like that?
Good one. So Sankranta, just if you take as a Sanskrit word, Kranta, Kranti is a movement, is some action. You know, that's where the word other ka as a word comes from. And sa generally is used in the sense of a vishesh, of a specific kind. Like say, I may be walking, you know, I may be just, oh, what are you doing? I'm walking. Oh, where are you walking to? Oh, I'm walking to a grocery store. So that going to the grocery store is now that sa part, like a very specific vishesha purpose, right? Similarly, now sun is always doing kranti. Sun is always moving continuously, like approximately 1 degree every day, so to say. That's why 360 days will come up to that, and sun has to go through, 365 days sun takes to complete one, so approximately 1 degree. The point is, it is moving every day, but this one is a vishesha move, a specific move. You know what is that specific move? Because the whole 360 degree, the sun's path, and therefore path for everybody else, like all the planets and all, is divided into 12 parts. Okay, and each part is that 30 degree. 360 divided by 12 is 30 degree, and that 30 degree is given as a zodiac. So those, that is the Mesh, Vrishabh, Mithun, Karka, or Aries and Taurus, and you know those names. So on this day, Sankranta, actually Makar Sankranti is not the only one. They say in the Panchang, if you look at it, you will see the Sankranta, just like Makar Sankranti, Mesha Sankranti, that which day it is moving, it is given. But we are not celebrating everything, otherwise we won't be working, so that day when sun is in the astronomy part of the sky, sun is transitioning from one zodiac to the other. So the kranti is always happening, but this is a sakranti, vishesha kranti. Therefore, the second part of the question was why it is considered bad. Well, that is the superstitions, all kind of fun we add, just like, oh my God, now the Mercury is retrograde. Do you know that the Mercury is retrograde right now? Those people who check their weekly astrology charts, they might know, oh, your chart, be careful, there will be some hurdles with the travel. The Mercury is going retrograde. If you are traveling all the time, you know that there are hurdles all the time and they come occasionally. This is not, I'm not discounting astrology, by the way. That is a very beautiful, amazing, wonderful subject. I'm not an expert like my wife is, for example, but that is not a subject. My point is, some superstitions might get added, or the change is happening, and the change is always a bit scary. Any change that we know, like you guys coming to Germany and says, how am I going to settle myself? Am I going to get the food I like, and so on and so forth? Will I able to communicate with them? Now, I presume all of you guys are expert in German. I just presume that you can nod your heads or something, which is very amazing. In fact, when I used to travel in German, the names I find so long, partly because I don't, the street names and all, and I'll just remember in my own ways, like I will make my own Marathi name or some Indian name for that long name or something, just that's how I remember. But that happens. Okay, so I hope I answered that question. Let's go to the next one.
Yes, yes, sure. Then third question. Actually, there are two questions from Alaji. The first question is, why do we rely on other countries to plot the accurate motion of the sun? Do we lack equipment or a technology? Or if so, what kind of technology?
Okay, so the first part, if you can say it again, like why do we rely on other countries?
To plot the accurate motion of the sun.
Okay, yes and no. Actually, yes and no, because actually we do use information from other places. I'll tell you the logic behind it. But if we wouldn't have used, we can still do it accurately in our case. Okay, that will be a big subject, so I won't go into too much digression. But it's a great question, whoever asked for it. No, Panchanga makers, like those of in the Maharashtra even otherwise might have heard Date Panchang. Like I work with Date Panchang. I'm working with Date Panchang for a long time. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter. If you are on Twitter, you will see Bharat Dinadarshika. Okay, just that may be the only reason to go to Twitter if you are not. Okay, Bharat Dinadarshika. It gets every day. It gets updated for that day. It's like I think 5:30 in the morning India time every day. So we have put it in automatic, and you'll see the Mahabharata Samvat 7,582, 5561 BC plus 2022, and so on. It took me 8 years to convince one Panchanga maker, okay, that this Mahabharata date is correct and we should use it as a reference. So I'm just answering in a different way. So even the question, the person could have also asked the question, why are we still talking Gregorian calendar? If any one of you, I ask you, when were you born? And you're going to throw some number at me, right? 1995, 1991. What is that 1991? Okay, the implicit sense behind it is 1991 years after Jesus was born. And we don't know what, but you don't say that, but that's what you mean. I mean, indirectly. So answer is why we sometimes use it, because of colonization. But the answer to the question that whoever asked is not that. Again, I will go back to Nirukta's definition of Sanatana. Sanatana Nityanutana. We are capable of refreshing ourselves. We are capable. Indian civilization, Indian philosophy, religion, whatever you want to call it, dharma, is extremely practical, extremely pragmatic. The Surya Siddhanta, the algorithm in your IT folks, algorithm in the Surya Siddhanta, okay, that was used to give the position of the sun in the sky, was the best algorithm in the whole world until last 200 years ago. There was no other algorithm, no other calendar in the entire world until last, 200 is, I'm being generous, I would say 100 years, 150 years, which could give a better position of the sun than Surya Siddhanta. There was nothing. The error made in the Greek calendars was 5 times more than the Surya Siddhanta. Now, why do we use others? Actually, I talked to Date Panchang makers, and they use the JPL. Everyone knows the word JPL, Jet Propulsion Lab, which is essentially collects the data from NASA, in California. So they use the algorithms from Jet Propulsion Lab. Like there are, for every planet, every celestial body, there are algorithms, like their motions and so on. Now, because of the modern observations made from outside space, like Hubble telescopes and all, we get more accurate information. So we should use it. Now, Surya Siddhanta talks about it. Surya Siddhanta says there is an algorithm, but if algorithm doesn't match with the actual observation, you have to make a druka correction. Okay, druka, pratyaksha correction you have to make. So that is our tradition. So we use it because if there is additional useful information, we ought to use it, and we use it. We should use it.
Yeah, and I think the reference with the same question, he asked the next question. Can you please explain how Georgian calendar and our Hindu calendar were mapped? Especially, how come Somvar as per Hindu remain lunardi or lunar day as per the Italian day naming system?
Yeah. Okay, that has a long answer. So what I'm going to say is, after this, you have to go to YouTube and type Nilesh Oak Sangam Talks. Okay. And one of my talk is the origin of the weekday sequence. Okay. Origin of the weekday sequence. And the answer is in the Surya Siddhanta, answer is in the Arya Bhattiya, and of course I discuss it. We can talk about the use of weekdays. They were not used frequent, they were not used, and again, I'll not go into why they were not used, although India created it, or if India did not create, the only ancient civilization going back to 14,000 plus years, actually, I'm talking because I have a Ramayana in my mind, which use the weekdays, is India. And we have a sufficient evidence that these weekday names and their weekdays unique sequence, because why does that come in like this, is also went from India in the east direction and also in the west direction. We have such a powerful evidence. Please watch that talk, Nilesh Oak Sangam Talks and Origin of Weekday Names. It's a subject by itself.
Yeah, not only Allah ji, but actually we can also have an interest. So we will also watch the same talk over YouTube. Again, there is a question from Nishikan ji. So he asked, can you please explain what are the parallel things happening in the world at the same time of Mahabharata? Are there any references like geographically or all in the continents where like what are the things which are happening parallelly while Mahabharata is going?
Yeah. Okay. We can only go by the evidence that we have available. Okay. Nyayadarshan says pramana taschartha pratipatte. You can only talk of the evidence that you have, and we can support the things. You cannot talk about the evidence that you don't have, or keep on discussing for hours what evidence we don't have. Okay, that's the nature of evidence, right? All the evidence comes to us as a happenstance. By luck, we get that evidence. So if you look at the Mahabharata times, Mahabharata itself describes, Sanjaya is describing to Dhritarashtra and many places, areas outside India. But I'll just tell you about the area that we have, that has been described in Mahabharata. Okay, for example, Mahabharata describes the areas to the north, west of India, like, Mayasur goes in that direction. North, where Mahabharata discusses Patal, which can be shown to be South America. Like, the emotional Patal is also the different layers and outside the earth. Forget that. Okay, we'll not go there. So South America, we can see some connections, but I'm going to give you even a better answer. But when Sanjay is talking about what different areas around India and many people who have come from it, just to give you an idea, for example, Bhagadatta. I don't know how many of you have heard that name. Bhagadatta, who came from Pragjotishpur. And now, as soon as some of you hear the name Pragjotishpur, you think of Assam, because there is in Purana, there is a Pragjotishpur in Assam. Okay, this Pragjotishpur is not in Assam. Mahabharata is very consistent, Ramayana is very consistent. It is saying it is in the west direction. And if you follow the Ramayana journey, if you follow the Arjuna's journey to Pragjotishpur, do you know where it is? The Pragjotishpur of a Bhagadatta is modern day Baghdad, or that area. Baghdad, Iraq. He has come with a one Aukshahini army to fight in the Mahabharata war. Okay, that Pragjotishpur is not only described 7,500 years ago in Mahabharata, but it is also described more than 14,000 years ago in Ramayana. And so Mahabharata, I'm going to stop on saying, okay, we knew up to definitely up to Turkey and Iraq and Iran, Afghanistan. Have you heard the word Uttara Kuru? Just like Kurus, the Pandavas and Kauravas are Kurus, okay? And they are a Dakshina Kuru, by the way. So when they are ruling in the area of Haryana, they are Dakshina Kuru. Do you know where the Uttarakuru is? Uttarakuru is the land that is east of the Caspian Sea. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, northern part of Afghanistan, western part of China, going all the way to latitude 40. That is all Uttarakuru. It's not even a land outside. It is our land. Okay, we should go get it if we want to. No, I'm just joking. But my point is, it is a Uttarakuru. Tibet, Tibet. Now we think it's a China. No, it was never a China. That's a different subject. And then if you go all the way to Indonesia, you can see the names, you can see the connections. Not only Mahabharata 7,500 years ago, even going back to 14,000 years ago. So finally, one summary on that. Another homework for all of you. You should go to Sangam Talks, Nilesh Oak Sangam Talks. I have two talks there. One is Sugriva's Atlas Part 1 and Sugriva's Atlas Part 2. Just a quick summary of it. Sugriv is describing the world 14,000 plus years ago, starting with India in the eastern direction all the way to Andes. Andes, including Andes, South America, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, and also Andes. In the west direction, Sugriva is describing all the way to Alps, where you guys are. In the north direction, Sugriva is describing all the way to the Arctic Sea, but he's saying don't even dare go there. Because if you go back to 14,000 years in this geography, you will find that if you go above latitude 40, it was glaciers. Where you are right now, you would be on a thick sheet of 4 or 8 mile glacier, Okay, so that's what the situation. He says, don't go there. First thing, you cannot go there, but if you go there, you cannot come back. That's what Sugriva says. And in the southern direction, Sugriva is describing all the way to Antarctica. All the way to Antarctica. So that's what India knew 14,000 years ago. So do watch those talks, Sugriva's Atlas Part 1, Part 2.
Sure. Guneshji, I don't know how much time we have, but we have so many questions. So can we take all of them?
We can go for 5 more minutes, surely.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try to make the answer shorter.
Yeah, that's not a problem. But yeah, we have a lot of response from the people, and I don't want to lose any of the questions. That's why I'm asking. So there is a question from Akshayji. Which calendar is truly a Indian calendar between Shakha, Samved, Vikram, Samvan? I don't know. I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Yugas. So, which is a truly Indian calendar? He's asking.
Yeah, the Yuga is not a calendar per se. Okay. Again, see, you have to be very careful with asking questions, because every question you ask, your homework is going to go up. Okay. So, for example, on the Yuga, it's not a calendar. Okay. It just like, for example, Iron Age, Bronze Age, Silver Age, whatever the ages we use, for example, right? Or if you see in the geology, different crustaceans, periods, quaternary, and Pleistocene and Holocene, some of the words we use. So Pleistocene and Holocene is not a calendar in the sense of, on the 1st of January 10,222 BC, Pleistocene changed to Holocene. There is nothing like that. It's an approximate period. So Yuga is like that. But the homework on the Yuga is, again, you can type Nilesh Oak and Yuga. Okay, I have talked about the 4 different kinds of Yuga, Yuga dogma, how we confuse the hell out of a Yuga, 432,000. And when I say we, I don't mean common people. Of course, common people make it. But so-called experts have made these are pro-India experts. They have created such a utter nonsense because of their ignorance. And we are just fooling people. Maybe not deliberate, but because of our dogmatic attitude. We cannot just blame others for dogmatic attitude. We hold it in a good proportion. Okay. So Nilesh Oak Yuga, you can watch that. But to answer the other question, see the Vikram Samvat, some other Shakha Samvat, Yudhishthir Samvat. These are reference points, just like Gregorian calendar, 1582. Okay. There is a Nowruz, Parsi calendar. We can start from anything. I mean, there was one calendar people started from Shivaji Maharaj birth year, so it can be started. So these are all calendars. Bottom line is, no matter which calendar you use, we as a human beings are creating calendar on the earth, but the sun is not going to listen to us. Okay, sun is going to travel the way sun wants to travel. We have to adjust to the sun. So which means what? We have those 4 cardinal points. as you go in ancient India and you search for it, we had multiple calendars existing at any given time. Even now, we have multiple calendars existing at, let's say just take India. We have one from 1st of January. I started with that because everyone at least knows it and understands it. Then we have one from the Chaitra Shukla Pratipada, the Ugadi, the Gudi Padwa, we talked about it. Okay. Then don't forget the Kartika, Diwali time, right? After the Deepavali, the next day, at least in Maharashtra, we call it Padwa of another kind. Kritika, Kartik Shukla Pratipada, right? Balit Pratipada. So that is another calendar. Gujarati, people from Gujarat, if they are there, that is their calendar. They use it. Do you know why that is their calendar? It is a business calendar, but business calendar in the sense of navigation. And now that month has also shifted now towards by a couple of months. But if you go 4,000 years plus, Gujaratis were navigating, just like Tamils were navigating. Dwarka was prosperous because of the commerce. So the gene among the Gujaratis that you see is from the times of Krishna. The business gene is from the time of Krishna, 7,500 years plus. And if you go to Pushastali, that goes back to 30,000 years, from the time of Revata mountain, and so on. So we have I digress, but we have multiple calendars existing at any given time.
Yeah, as you have said, the reference of Krishna, our next question is actually related to Krishna. So Harishji had asked, actually they have said that Dhanyavad for the wonderful lecture. How long did Lord Ram and Lord Krishna live? We know Ramayana held in Treta Yuga and Mahabharata in a Dwapar Yuga. Do we have a length of Ramayana and Mahabharata life cycle within this Yuga?
Okay. The second part, I'll start with the second part. So for that, Harish ji, I can see you on the screen there. You have to go back and watch those talk, Nilesh Oak and Yuga. And possibly you're going to find close to 10 talks. Okay. Sometime part 3 in 3 parts, another series in the 4 parts. And please watch all of them. There may be another just one standalone talk. Do watch them. It does take time because see, we have all stuck into our mind 432,000 and all that. And you will see what is the significance. That number is not wrong, 432,000. It has nothing to do with the chronology. It is a purely astronomy number, but we confused it and we started using for chronology and made the whole mess. Okay, that's why we wonder, okay, does that match? No, it doesn't match. It should not match. That is the point. Now coming back to the longevity or age of Ram and Krishna. In case of Ram, we don't know the exact number. We can only tell this, that Ram was born, and when he was a 16-year-old, just when he completed 16, he got married. Then for 1 year, he lived, Ram and Sita lived in Ayodhya. Then they had to go for 14 years to Vanvas, okay, forest life. And at the end of that 14, so 17, 18 plus 14, so about 30, 31, that is when he killed Ravana. So those of you can look at your age and say, hey, what Ram did at 31. Okay, I mean, just going alone through this and so on, just amazing. And then he came and he ruled. There are some statements, but no clear idea as to how long he ruled. So we don't know the answer. In case of Krishna, we know the exact answer. Again, I think Harishji asked that question, but doesn't matter who asked the question. Your homework goes up. So I think Guneshji is taking notes for the homework. Okay, you have to go to again Nilesh Oak Sangam Talks, and Sangam Talks is not the only place. I have discussed more in many places, but Sangam Talks is one good reference. And just type Krishna Charitra or something like this. I'm going to give a quick answer. Krishna was born in 5633 BCE, 5633 BCE, and then Krishna Nirvan. I mean, the person who doesn't take birth doesn't dies either. But in a practical language, we use that, like Krishna was born and Krishna passed away. So Krishna Nirvan happened in 5525 BCE. Krishna lived for 107 plus years. For magic number, you can remember 108, and that's perfectly fine. And just now, what I just told you, 5633 BCE to 5525 BCE, and Guneshji had explained, the evidence for this comes from various Puranas, various Acharyas like a Madhvacharya and so on. It comes from various sub-granthas written on the Mahabharata, like Mahabharata Nirnayamrut, Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnaya, and so on. It comes from Harivamsha. It comes from the Mahabharata itself, Bhagavad Purana, so on and so forth. And as far as the science is concerned, we are looking at astronomy, we are looking at genealogy, we are looking at oceanography, we are looking at climatology. All of these references come together to define this lifespan of Krishna from 5633 BCE to 5525 BCE, which is when Dwarka was flooded and destroyed also. And we can find the evidence from around the world, including Dwarka, including East Coast, Black Sea, Caribbean, the cricket fans, even from Caribbeans, everywhere in the world, phenomenal evidence, oceanography evidence for flooding and destruction of Dwarka in 5525 BC.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nilesh ji. And I'm very sorry, there are a lot of questions which are still remaining, but I request all of you to visit Nilesh ji's channel. Like most of the questions are related to the talk. They have actually given on the YouTube channel, so we can visit and maybe increase our knowledge. Thank you so much.